five, four, three, two, one. We're live.
Welcome to Heroes for Hope, where trauma is a superpower. Today's episode, Joe and I are going to take a deep dive into the Golden Rule pool with our guest, Craig Cooper. Hey, yesterday was Valentine's Day. Did you guys have a good Valentine's Day?
Yeah. Oh, it was wonderful.
Pretty good day.
Pretty good day. Pretty good day. Joe, good day?
Not bad.
All right. Well, let me tell you about my friend Craig here. Craig was in the Army from 86 to 90. Craig was actually stationed in Germany when the Berlin Wall fell back in 1989. Craig and I have a few things in common. He actually graduated from San Jose State. Go Spartans. I was kicked out after like one semester, but I found a home other places. We've both been married a super long time. So you've got 30 years under your belt.
27, but who's counting?
27. I'm up around there too. Joe, how many years you got?
Combined or this one?
Combined. That makes you an expert.
Hell,
an expert driver.
Probably qualified 20 plus maybe total.
All right.
No.
Four kids? Yeah.
6.
4 kids. I got 3. You got one Matthew.
I've got 2 and my ex-wife. My wife has 2. So we got 4 between us.
We both come from big families, San Francisco families. Craig's parents are both San Franciscans. Mine are San Franciscans. But the thing I kind of focus in on Craig and I is that he is one of 6 and I'm one of 7, and I have a real belief in birth order. I'm the second of 7. You're the 4th of 6
right.
boys,
yeah.
And it just has a profound effect. Definitely on my reckless personality. Joe, you have brothers and sisters?
I've got 1 half brother.
All right, yeah, just very reckless. In fact, I have what's called an Irish twin. So my brother Paul and I are the same age for 8 days out of every year. I used to be really proud about that, and then my kids made me kind of realize it's a little bit kind of disgusting. So another show. So today, Craig is going to pay it forward. Is a veteran. He is involved in a group called Team Rubicon, which is kind of veteran run, but a lot of civilian members. And we're talking a lot about that. So I want to say welcome to Heroes for Hope, Craig.
Hey, I should be thanking you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Craig and I have actually spent a little bit of nice breakfast time together today, and so today when I say we're going to drive into the Golden Rule pool. What's the Golden Rule mean to you? And I thought this was kind of interesting when I was on hiring boards, interviewing prospective police officers, and the younger generation has no idea what the Golden Rule really is. And so I had an opportunity to define it for these people. So what's the Golden Rule to you?
I just want to be treated like I would want others to treat me, or as I would treat them, and with dignity, respect, and professionalism when it comes to it.
You know, it's an answer that kind of just flows right out of us. You know, the Golden Rule is treat people like you want to be treated, and it's been lost to a generation. Joe, did you take copious notes on that, or do you know what the Golden Rule is?
Well, I was thinking more in lines of don't get caught, but yeah, or maybe pay it forward.
Indeed. And Joe, kudos to that wonderful backdrop you have on your side there. The Heroes for Hope logo. I like it. I want one from my end too. So, Craig, we're going to tell our story because our stories, they have a wisdom, and they can help the people who we serve and protect to make sense of their own struggles.
Sure.
So, we have to tell our stories to help bridge that civilian first responder gap to create a sense of shared perspective. And this is straight out of the newspaper from yesterday, my local Bay Area paper here. And it's a CDC survey that says that teen girls are reporting record levels of sadness. And this is an interesting thing because this is what the whole premise of Heroes for Hope is to take our experiences and create a bridge so that other people can benefit from our experiences. And so the opening to this was nearly 3 in 5 girls felt persistent sadness in 2001, double the rate of boys. and 1 in 3 girls seriously considered attempting suicide, according to the data released Monday by the Center of Disease Control. I tell you what, that bothers me. I have a high school age son. I have 2 adult kids. Craig, high school age,
Right.
college.
I have twins that are seniors in high school.
I tell you, and so this is, originally when I wrote my piece on Heroes for Hope, this is the group that I think that we really need to reach out to and help by sharing our story. So I'm glad we have you here today. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is your time in the Army in the Cold War. And a lot of people don't remember the Cold War. I mean, without this, it's like if you watch any James Bond movie, those are Cold War eras. So millions of millennials and Gen Zers do not remember the Cold War. They were never exposed to the threats of the Soviet Union, who we now know as Russia. They did not live through the 1989 fall of the Berlin Wall, the daily threat of nuclear annihilation, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But times are changing fast, and Russia and China are back. And so these are things that we need to kind of talk about. So I want you to talk a little bit about in a minute here is that we're going to talk about the Cold War, the Berlin Wall. Then we're going to go in to talk a little bit more about vicarious trauma. And then we're going to talk a little more about how we transition our struggles, our traumas into superpowers. So tell us about your time over in Germany around 1989-ish.
Yeah, sure. So I was in Germany about 88 through almost mid-90 and 3rd Armored Division. Our task was during the Cold War to defend the Fulda Gap. Fulda Gap was a gap between certain mountain ranges and city of Fulda. And that's where Russia, East Germany forces were thought to be able to come through into West Germany, and really one of the assault paths into Western Europe was through the Fulda Gap. So we were to close that off and defend it by any means possible. And the Cold War to me it's like going to college forever. You're just in a classroom, but you're out in the field, and you're training and you're training and you're training and learning more things and training and you never get to put to use what you learned. So you never get the job. You never graduate and go out and get that job. You're just perpetually in a training mode, but ready to go at a moment's notice if something went cockeyed.
Joe, you were over in Europe for a little bit, huh?
Well, it's funny. I'm listening and I'm thinking that, those NATO forces that were there were making basically a speed bump if all hell broke loose. I mean, there was no way that we would be able to stop the Russian onslaught once it started. And part of that contingency plan was the use of nuclear weapons. They were authorized in that theater of operations should that conflict ever happen. Thank God it never did. But it's funny to study the old war plans from the Cold War and to see how they evolved to today's modern spectrum on the global war on terror.
Yeah, it's interesting that most Americans, these things drop out of our busy life and our busy history. And I think about, we'll get into in a minute here about the fall of the Berlin Wall and these operations that Americans were always just walking the fine line. I thought about my time back in the Philippines when we were doing patrols against the National People's Army out there, their communist faction. And so we were constantly doing things around the world. Your wall fell, Pinatubo erupted, kicking the United States out. Our military presence there since the end of World War II. We were a military presence there before World War II. Very important. And now the Marines are back. 3,000 Marines are back in the Philippines operating. So it's an interesting time. So tell us about the fall of the wall.
Yeah, so I had a couple girlfriends over in Germany. One actually had family in East Germany that she hadn't seen for a while. So when it was, say what you will about Reagan, when he was asking Gorbachev to tear down that wall, it really was kind of, in the eyes of Western Germans who had relatives on the other side of the wall, it really was kind of a ridiculous thing in the late 80s to still have that wall up. And I think that was, once, people came to their senses and said, yeah, this is really is so archaic. Where are we with this Cold War? And yeah, let's tear this thing down. And boy, what I remember most are the Trabants. That's the type of car that was in East Germany. It came in three colors: black, white, and gray. And they were coming over to West Germany in droves and breaking down, and the people were just so big smiles on their face. They were just so happy to be in Western Germany and not in Eastern Germany, even though they were standing by a broken down car. Um, it was definitely an interesting time. I had people from back home who I hadn't heard from in a couple of years asking me, "Hey, go to Berlin and get me a piece of the wall. That's going to be a cool little relic to have." And I had planned a trip to go and check it out, and I just decided not to. I think there was enough traffic on the road for people that absolutely needed to use those roads. They didn't need Craig Cooper clogging it up. So
It's interesting when you think about um, what our how we have defined ourselves as Americans is usually when we find ourselves overseas and see how people perceive us and our different levels of freedom. I remember myself being in the Philippines, a very needy country at the time, and I really felt what my obligation was as an ambassador of freedom over there. And so that must have been a huge feeling of dedication and what it's like to be an American when that wall fell, about how well sought after freedom is for people.
oh yeah, I saw it very clearly on bivouacs out in the countryside. You'd roll into town and I was in a field artillery battalion, so you literally roll into town in your tanks and your Humvees and whatnot, and kids and young kids to grandparents are there throwing candy at you. They're happy to see you there because they know why you're there. And then it was a stark contrast when you go back home, back to the city. And I was stationed in a city about 30 minutes east of Frankfurt called Hanau. Um, when you would roll out through the cities, they would literally be throwing rocks at you. They didn't want you there because you were a presence that was there 24/7. Versus the countryside, they'd see you a couple times a year when you're on maneuvers, and they were closer to that Fulda Gap in relation to what my unit was doing out there. Um, so yeah, it was a stark contrast between what people thought of freedom versus not having freedom. And I don't know, maybe the people in the countryside had more family over on the other side of the wall versus people that lived in the city. I could never quite figure out the animosity versus the friendliness. It was really a night and day, night and day.
Well, yeah, you do have that perception of being an occupying force. I just remember that also in Okinawa, how the Okinawans didn't want us there back in the 90s. Joe, can you share with anything about you in Iraq? Similar things?
Well, it's funny when the quote unquote invasion kicked off in 2003, the the juggernaut as it rolled up into Iraq was met with a lot of praise and thank you, from those who were oppressed for all those years because they didn't have Saddam Hussein anymore. And, those were great days. Now, I got there around March of 2004, just as the major combat operations were starting to wind down and it entered a transition phase that was more or less an occupation / rebuilding phase, but there was still heavy combat going on. It was just, and after a while, the novelty kind of wore off because the AQI forces, the anti-Iraq forces, didn't want us there to begin with, because we were the infidel presence. We were, trampling on their sacred Muslim ground. And over time, the Iraqi confidence in our presence eroded to the point that it turned into a civil war between factions. And we just pretty much got stuck in the middle of it with a pooper scooper, so to speak.
When I think about, your experience in Iraq, think about the Cold War in Europe, think about my time in the Pacific, is that, ultimately, and also as a police officer, you say this too, is that our mission is a humanitarian mission. It's a hearts and mind mission. And so when you are done with the combat operations, it's all the concept of winning people's hearts and minds over to the things that we enjoy as Americans, which is our freedom. And a lot of people, it's a whole new concept for them. And they're a whole when we are in the business of nation building, we have to teach people the responsibilities of freedom, because I think ultimately a lot of people they don't mind being subjugated by totalitarian governments. They don't mind being told what to do, and
No, they
most
don't.
Americans, they don't realize that until they go off on an adventure and realize what it's like to live in amongst these other people in the world. So, yeah, that must have been. Did you ever see the wall, the broken wall?
No,
Wall?
not personally.
Yeah.
I never went. Like I said, never saw the need to clog up traffic with one more person. There was that many people coming back over to East Germany to reunite with families, and that was the most important thing going on until I left. Literally, it was ongoing. I left the next May 90, and it was still a huge daily thing. The migration to Western Germany.
When I think about all the people that we have known in our lives, I think back and I go, where are those people now? Think about the traumas of those people living in communist regime, and so how wonderful it was for that wall to come down. Think about the people that you reached out to in Iraq, Joe, and where are they today? How are they managing through their traumas? And that's the goal of Heroes for Hope, is really more stories, so these people aren't forgotten. A lot of times we talk about our military adventures, our law enforcement, critical incidents, and we have to pause and always take a breath and take a moment to remember all those victims of the people who lived in West of Germany, and the people who lived under Saddam Hussein and all these other very heavy-handed regimes. These people were victims, and what are they doing today? And there's a whole subject matter on that. So you get out of the Army, finish college at San Jose State, got into the tech field or tech industries.
I worked a lot of different Silicon Valley companies, Hewlett Packard, Apple, some restoration hardware, among others, as a packaging engineer.
Then after 30 years or so into that, man, you tell you what, we have this compulsion to give back, to be servant leaders, to people who put the community first, the other first. It's just something that pulls us and draws us through life. And you found a group called
Team Rubicon, but it really started a little bit before that, because I had to find Team Rubicon, and I actually had to get a kind of a verbal slap in the face from my dad about serving your fellow man. I made a snide comment one time about at a family get together saying, I don't think veterans should ever have to serve on jury duties. I think it's a small price, a small little gift back. Hey, thanks for your time in the service. We're never going to call you for jury duty, because who wants to go to jury duty, right? And my dad just walked by without missing a beat and said, service to man doesn't end just because you were in the Army. And we all kind of snickered, oh, that's dad, and off he went. But it struck me. So I started looking for service-related industries that I thought would be up my alley, like search and rescue. And it wasn't until I went to Las Vegas for a Tough Mudder event that I saw the Team Rubicon tent. And I only knew them as a sponsor. I didn't know what they did. just my luck. Turns out they're a service related entity, an organization run by veterans, um, with first responders and what we call kick-ass civilians, and they just help people out on their worst days. The light bulb goes off, and that happens to, I think, all of us at some point in our lives. There's a light bulb that goes off, and it just clicks. That's it, and that was it for me. And so I've been doing this since 2017.
So it kind of speaks to you found this at a Spartan run. So I know what Spartan runs are. Maybe a lot of people in our audience don't know what a Spartan run is. So tell us what a Spartan run is.
Yeah. So Tough Mudders and Spartan races are obstacle course races. It's basically your confidence course in the military. You're running and you're jumping over things, through things, climbing around, up, over, and under, jumping over fire. There's all sorts of things they throw in your way to get to the finish line. And a 5 mile race that might be easy for somebody to do, but you throw in 10 obstacles, and now you might be taking twice the amount of time. The race I was on was a 24-hour race. I wanted to push myself. Could I last 24 hours? And that aside, I'm so thankful for having been there, because I don't know if I would have found Team Rubicon as early as I did.
It's kind of interesting how, if you put something out into the universe and you put some feet behind it, it's amazing the things that your life starts attracting. I know that when I started my writing journey, it was the same thing. Just the people started coming in my life. So amen to that. So tell us a little about the history, if you can recall, like who founded it, how long it's been, and what their primary mission is.
Right. So it was a Marine sniper named Jake Wood, and he was sitting at home wondering what the next step was. He had gotten out of the military, and the Haiti earthquake happened, 2010, and he's just looking at all the people suffering, the scenes from the earthquake, and it struck him. I have skill sets that could help these people. I'm a sniper, but I'm combat medic trained. I can give IVs. I can patch people. I can splint arms. I can do all these things. So we gave a shout out to a couple other buddies, and they were all in without question. Yeah, tell me where and when we're meeting. Let's go. They packed up as much medicines as they could carry. They got funds from family and friends to get them over there and give them some basis for staying a certain amount of time. And at the airport, they met a Jesuit priest who struck up a conversation. He was actually going there to do the same thing. There was also a doctor that, I don't know if it was in the original group, but they met up with the doctor. So there was a group of about 5 to 7 of them with the same goal, went over to Haiti. And there was a point, I think it was Port-au-Prince, where they flew into. There was a point where they were backpacking towards Haiti, and they said, "Hey, we're in it, right? If we take another step, there's no going back. Is everybody okay with that?" And it was kind of like they likened it to Caesar crossing the Rubicon, and there's no going back. We crossed this Rubicon River. Caesar's forces are committed. And so that's how the name Team Rubicon came about. And they were there, I forget for how long, a couple of weeks helping out, but it really, while they were there, the roots of Team Rubicon were forming. Everything from the name, just what they were doing, disaster relief, disaster response, down to the end of day campfire, where they talked about their feelings and what did they experience during the day, and how did they experience it, and which might have been the same thing for two different people, but the experience might have been different, might have brought up different feelings. These were combat experienced guys that were out there, and so they were seeing a lot of the same things they saw in war, but it was just happened to be casualties after a natural disaster.
Yeah, amen to that. There were a lot of celebrities down there at that time too. I remember like Sean Penn was down there, and so we all do what we can when these cataclysmic events happen, and so from that incident becomes a really great thing. And I kind of want to circle back. I want to talk more about that campfire. I want to talk more about the tenets of this wonderful organization, especially the changing of the socks. But Joe, you kind of reached out recently to get a membership and to get an application for Team Rubicon.
Well,
What
actually,
attracted you?
I've been a member since about 2018, the South branch, and I just applied for it second or third time for the fellowship, and
Oh, yeah.
I'm waiting to hear on that. I've signed up for several missions, including several that they had back in the Dominican Republic. I think it was before COVID hit, and I mean, of course, they can't take everyone, but yeah, I've volunteered to do the daily threat assessment, the daily threat brief also. So I try to stay involved with Team Rubicon as much as possible.
What attracted you, Joe, to join in?
Service, man. Selfless service. I'm huge believer in paying it back. Just because you can't wear a uniform or don't wear a uniform anymore doesn't mean that your service stops. It's something that I believe that it's ingrained in our DNA, so to speak. And, I'm constantly looking for opportunities to serve.
Yeah, we're always looking for opportunities to serve, for sure. So tell us, you've been with Team Rubicon since 2017?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many spikes have you been on, do you think? And tell us a little more about the spikes you've been out to, the team building with it.
Yeah, we have your spikes we call ops and operations, and then we have service projects. I've probably been on 24 operations in a half a dozen different states, and it's been anywhere from wildfires out here in California, tornadoes out in Iowa, to flooding in Houston and hurricanes in Florida. And at the end of the day, it's not all the same, but the result is somebody needs our help, and they don't have the power or ability or finance to do it, to help themselves out, and they are so grateful. To look in their eyes when you show up, and it's at no cost to them that you're helping them out, and really to decrease their worry a little bit, increase their hope that this is their worst day, but it's going to get better from here.
Mm-hmm. Because they met you.
Because they've met people from Team Rubicon. Yeah.
And I tell you, that's the way I think about some things that I was involved in at mutual aid and law enforcement. I was down at Coffee Park in Santa Rosa fire the day that was day after that. And that was an entire community. I have some video on my phone where you just look around and it's utter devastation, burned car. I mean, a war zone.
We were out there that year, plus or minus a couple months, Redding, Santa Rosa, then the Paradise, the campfire, and it was all the same thing. You go down these streets, there's literally nothing left down to a foundation. And the people owned a pool. There was a chain link fence around the pool, but you couldn't tell which way the house was oriented. Was it one story? There was literally nothing there, nothing left. It was pure devastation.
I mean, we consider, a lot of people get caught up about the lives that are lost in a lot of these natural disasters, and even in war and in police work. But for every one life that's lost, there have hundreds of people, their lives are impacted either by a death, either by a displacement. I guarantee you there are probably still people that you ran across in those old places are still trying to get their life back together. And they're dealing with what's called either straight trauma because they were heavily involved in the incident, or vicarious trauma.
Right.
We'll talk some more about that, which are things that a lot of police officers struggle with and first responders. So a couple of the things that I was really impressed with Team Rubicon, and that's their tenets. the
Oh,
tenets
yeah.
of Team Rubicon. Can you talk a little about those primarily? I love the campsite. If you could take us to one of these campfires and maybe flesh that out a little bit more, and also the changing of the socks, I thought
Yeah.
was just wonderful.
So I'll see if I can get them all down and in order because they really are. They really do go in order. The first tenet is, and there's 7 of them: mission first, gray shirts always. Right? You don't sign up and say, "I want to go do this." You're a soldier first. You're a Marine first. You'll go and do what we ask you to do first, and then if you have skill sets, we'll put you where you can best help us out.
Mhm.
But you're a gray shirt first, right? So and we have to complete that mission. The next step, and this is where there are a lot of people that have signed up for Team Rubicon but have not done anything but sign up, is step into the arena. Thanks for signing up, but now come help,
Mhm.
right? Step into the arena, and as you're stepping in, um, know your role. Everybody's got a role, and we all have to know it. We're a process basically led organization. So somebody in New York is going to buck and limb a tree the same way I'm going to buck and limb or muck out a house in California. Um, from there, get shit done. That's what we do. At the end of the day, we talk about how much shit we got done, and there's no other way to put it because it's just getting shit done for these people that have little hope and a lot of worry. Now, in going through these different ops, one after the other, at some point you gotta know to change your socks.
This is great.
You cannot be dealing with that. And first responders deal with this every single day. It's their job. Sometimes they can't change their socks. I don't know how it goes, maybe the weekend or whatever their 2 days off is. That's when they need to be changing their socks. And it's super important. I didn't give much credence to it until I went on 3 ops in the side of a month. And it was literally come home, do the wash, hop back out to the airport and fly somewhere else. And I gotta say, when I came home, I actually told my wife, I need to change my socks. I need to slow up. And because you just see devastation and how bad people have it, it just starts getting depressing.
Yes.
Even though what you're doing is the best thing, it's the golden rule, and you're helping somebody out on their worst day. It still gets depressing. You feel bad for these people that they're in that way, and that at some point you get to leave, but they're still there.
Yeah.
Just moving on with the tenants. Mom's a donor. We use our money, and we're a nonprofit 503c organization, very transparent, and we don't pay our full timers very much. We use that for our means and equipment out in the field to get shit done at the best of our ability and a quality job. And I'm sure I'm leaving one or two out, but mom's a donor, and there's another one that's kind of unwritten. Don't be a dick. And it aligns with what you're asking about with the golden rule.
Yeah.
Treat others as you'd like to be treated. So when you're there, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
And the last one is I'm reminded is everyone's an adult.
Yeah.
Right? We're not out there to babysit people. So if you're not mature enough to go and do this, it's not for everybody. But we all try to be adults, and then in that vein, we can get the most shit done.
Yeah. I just have this image from my own experience of you guys out there around that campfire at the end of the night talking about the things that went well and the things that you can improve on. I mean, it's just this is a system of vulnerability of team that it's kind of new to me. We come from a very didactic, I'm going to tell you what to do thing, my way or the highway, but it's just these people, these adults that are coming around going, man, I felt this way today and we can do this better tomorrow. I mean, it's a great sense of reflection that everybody should do probably at the end of every day.
Yeah. As difficult as the work is sometimes on any given day, up on a roof in 90-degree weather and the humidity's hitting you and you're just sweating like a dog and but you got to tarp this person's roof, right? So that they can be in a semi-livable space, or you're mucking out from underneath a trailer as we were doing a couple of weeks ago in Santa Cruz to just fire mitigation work here in Northern California. Um, it's difficult work, but we get around the campfire and we're so jazzed about helping people. It's an absolute drug. It's an adrenaline rush, and we want more of it the next day. So keep the work orders coming is general sentiment around the campfire.
Many hands, many hands. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, as one who was who lived in Southwest Georgia for the greater part of a decade and a half, I was on the receiving end of many of those tornadoes and many of those tropical storms and many of those hurricanes that blew through. And while I didn't do disaster relief specifically with Team Rubicon because they were stretched to their limitations, there were other organizations out there that I teamed up with and, you know, cut trees and cleared roads and delivered food and water and, you know, the whole bit. And at the end of the day, there's something noble in that cause, you know, that even though the work sucked and it sucked, you know, humping a chainsaw all day, it's not a fun thing. But when you have a shared experience and you can all sit around and bitch and gripe about it, there's a sense of camaraderie and inclusiveness about that most people will never experience.
Yeah, there's something profound being part of a natural disaster, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, fires. Joe and I, we sat out a huge tornado in Georgia 3 years ago during Warrior Week. Huh? Remember that?
Yeah. Yes. Matter of fact,
that was a near-death experience. That was something. The one thing that I really want to kind of key in on because it's such a great metaphor is change your socks. And so for me, because you extended, hey, I don't know how many times you guys do it as cops, but when I heard you say that, I go, man, that's great. Because when I as an infantryman and as a backpacking with my kids, is that it's a discipline to change your socks. Okay, because you could be tired and you can have a hot spot. And you need to change those socks before that hot spot becomes a crippling blister, before you get jungle foot and your foot rots off. And so when you look at that and you look at change your socks and you make it an emotional metaphor to where you got to take care of yourself. You need to decompress. You need to get some meditation time. And thank you. The meditation is becoming much more popular as a form of self maintenance, and it's a great thing. And if you aren't aware of this concept that, you know what, if I want to train like an animal, work like an animal, I got to rest like an animal. You know, the beast,
right?
The beast. I'm going to work like a beast, rest like a beast. And when the lion goes out on the savannah and takes down its game, that thing is huffing and puffing in the shade, resting and digesting. And you got to wrap your head around that. No, the human mind, and a psychologist told me this when I was going through my stuff, is that the human mind is not supposed to be its apex for 30 years straight, you know, in the military or in as a first responder. You got to find that downtime. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this vicarious trauma, because a lot of the downtime to the untrained mind is very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy. So we'll talk more about that. And we learned a lot about that in PATH. Joe and I, we went to Warrior PATH, which was great, dealing with post-traumatic growth, where it's a train the trainer stuff. And, you know, they give you all this information. It helps you, and you got to go out and help your fellow veterans so they can be helpers again in their community. Amen to that, Joe?
Amen, brother.
Any other great tidbits?
Just back to the change your socks. It's tangible and intangible, as you said. It's Team Rubicon. When you're out in the field, they really take care of you. So they literally have laundry days for you to change your socks, which is awesome. But when you get back home, you gotta take some time off, because mentally you're no good to anybody if you're starting to become depressed and feeling so much pity for these people. that it affects you. You're out there to help others.
Yeah.
Team Rubicon. Last thing Team Rubicon wants to do is have to help its own because somebody's overdoing it.
Yeah.
And that's when you gotta be an adult.
You got to
Raise your hand and say, I need to change my socks.
You got to change your socks. There's a whole psychology behind it. And I'm going to put it in a nutshell here because if it interests you, it's going to benefit you. And I'm so I'm surprised about how many veterans don't know about this. I learned about it in law enforcement. Is that life is just a straight line for most people. It's day to day. Okay. And then when you do things like Team Rubicon, things in the military, things in law enforcement, all of a sudden your life is up here. It's up here. It's this big adrenaline rush. You mentioned that a couple of times. You feel really great about yourself, and then that's over, and you go crash. So you go down past normal life, and you're down here in a sort of depression, and you got to work your way back up into normalcy. And so law enforcement is just like this for a whole career, and it's very unhealthy unless you know about it. And so when I was at Warrior Path, and they were telling this to a lot of veterans, and it was the first time they heard it, and I was like, wow. Once you know what you're coping with the demon is, once the devil is better than devil you don't know, and once you know about that devil, it's easier to kind of wrestle it.
Yeah,
you agree, Joe?
Oh, hell yeah. But the funny, I guess the other side of that coin is most people don't know what they don't know. That's and it's as simplistically complicated as that. To use, that metaphor.
Judge that used to sign a lot of my search warrants had that on his desk. People only know what they know. And that's why it's great to hear stories from so many people, because you share it, because your story is going to help other people.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about vicarious trauma. We talked a lot about the victims. We talked a lot about as responders to these tragedies, how we perceive them too. So I'm going to give you a little definition. This is from something I found online from the British Medical Association in 2021, and so it's relevant. It kind of goes back to the article that I read about the teenage girls. A lot of the things that we coped with in COVID. This will deal with people who worked in emergency rooms, receiving people who are suffered from COVID, families that suffer from COVID. So it's very appropriate. So vicarious trauma is a process of change that results from empathetic engagements with trauma survivors. And so we're talking about empathy. We're talking about the golden rule today. So it's very appropriate. Anyone who engages empathetically with survivors of traumatic incidents it can be potentially affected. And so I'm talking about, people that we may not always consider. And these are in the trauma of being involved in a lockdown, the traumas of being a teenager now, whose brains have been affected by these lockdowns and COVID. So common signs of vicarious trauma, we'll just kind of go through them. Just as a reminder, if you've worked with survivors of traumatic incidents, you should be aware of the following signs. And I'll just bullet point them down here, and we'll just chop it up as we go down. Experiencing lingering feelings of anger, rage, and sadness about patients and victimization. I know from my own perspective is that anger was a major component of how I manifested this going out to these things. You come home a little bit angry. And so you're constantly, if you're always doing these things, you're constantly dealing with some type of anger, because we always have these responses, your triggers, and you have a response, like a love language to talk about, and we have these defaults that we go to. And so these are things you got to be cognizant of. Anything?
Yeah, I could sum this up in one word. In psychiatric circles, that's called transference. You are taking on the emotions and the trauma associated with something that you had nothing to do with, just by human nature.
Yeah, which is kind of an unhealthy repercussion of something that's healthy. So we should be compassionate, empathetic people, but but it can really weigh on you. One of the things I may have talked about in previous episodes, in suicides, went to a lot of them as a sergeant. I had to go to a lot of them. I had friends that committed suicide. Is that on? I felt such a sense of empathy in these situations for the family and for just the darkness that this person must have been in. That I would go to mass, Catholic kid. I go to mass during the week, and I'd light a candle just to let go of to let it go of me too. And I thought that was a healthy way to do it. Becoming overly involved emotionally with victims.
Yeah, and just to go back a little bit, Team Rubicon for a 12-year-old organization is one of the most professional organizations I've ever been involved with. From you deal with these people out in the empathy of the plight of these people, and then a week you get back home, and a couple of days later you'll get somebody from wellness, from TR, calling up to check on you. Like, who thinks of that stuff? My company never, if somebody passed away in the company, you didn't get a day off, you didn't get this or that, or when there was something that happened to somebody, maybe a coworker lost a baby, things like that. Nobody ever, hey, we're gonna have HR on site to help you out, But Team Rubicon does things like that. It's the little things like that. They really do help you out tangibly and intangibly.
Oh man, that is a sign of a progressive organization. Experiencing bystander guilt, shame, or feeling of self-doubt. I can imagine that comes up a lot, especially after violent situations.
You go to church and you light a candle. I had two pretty good buddies die within a month and a half of each other a few years ago, and I started questioning, like, these guys are the salt of the earth.
Yeah,
they gave and they gave and they gave. I literally never heard a bad word about anybody from them, about them. They were just great guys, and so you light a candle and keep going to church. I kind of moved away from the church because I didn't understand why you would take these two people and not to say, hey, good or bad, there's some other choices out there.
Yeah.
But these two guys, what are you doing? So we all deal with it differently.
And that's one of the things when I look back on, where my career path had brought me, is that it brought me to a level of people go, well, being a cop for all those years or whatever, you must be pretty jaded. And I go, no, you know what? It gave me a real appreciation for life,
Sure.
And so you don't know what true goodness is until you've seen real evil, And so when you lose a friend that's a good person, to death, is that, what? There's a purpose, and it makes us really more clearly define what true goodness is, and the sacrifice of true goodness. So
yeah.
Amen to that. Loss of hope, pessimism, and cynicism. What do you think about that?
Well, as a former Leo, former first responder, medic, nurse, blah, 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 the list goes on. Now I've learned to totally convert that thinking to something positive. But yes, there was a long time where I was a cynical bastard, because you're inundated with so much tragedy, and a lot of it is because of stupidity. Granted, bad things happen to good people just because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I would say greater than 75% of what we witness is caused by human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hard as hell not to get cynical and think to yourself, well, you know what? They deserved it. And it's only been within the past couple of years, I guess, since, maybe 2018, that I've started to, think outside that box that, it's not healthy. And once you realize that you're doing it and you can change your perception of that situation, it helps. Am I always going to be cynical to a point? Probably, because of my life experiences. But I'm learning to navigate that and channel that into a more positive outlook. And it sucks. It really does, because you have to admit your faults.
There's a little saying that I don't know where it came from, but it was smiles and cries, and we said that a lot in law
Training
enforcement.
Day.
Is that
The movie
it's just a
Training
way
Day.
of coping into got to put your pack on and you got to come back to work. You got to go on to the next call, and so was that the right way to do it? Well, in the beginning of my career, the first half of my career, yeah, that's the way. That was the expectation, and now it's changed a little bit. But I just remember is that you know what? If you're not laughing and smiling, then you're crying.
Yeah.
And you have people that depend on you. You have the rest of your crew that depends on you. You have your family that depends on that paycheck, and you got to come up with these survival mechanisms. And they're all natural. I mean, probably culturally, you probably learn a little bit of it because there are some unhealthy ways to deal with it too that I want to go into. And one of them I'll name the three of them, then or four of them, I'm going to break them down. So distancing, numbing, detachment, and staying busy. And these are very negative. And the first one I want to talk about is distancing, and that's isolation. And isolation is a huge killer. And we could probably think about some of our friends that went down a real dark rabbit hole, and we can see is that they were isolating. Joe, you think we're going down the right trail here? Isolation?
Yeah, it's well, it can be a useful tool because it's an insulative tool and it allows you to take yourself out of that situation. The downside of that is when that's your go-to instead of dealing with the situation, then you open yourself up to, the darkness that's inevitably going to come with that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on numbing this real quick. I did a show on how veterans process emotions, and numbingness basically is your mind saying, look, I've got too much shit going on right now. There's too much static and I can't concentrate. So I'm going to shut the hell down for a little bit. I'm going to hit the pause button. And then when I start to gain traction and I can start to figure some of this stuff out, then, it's game on. But until then, and it's a protective measure from your mind is really what it is. I mean, it's oversaturation. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but most people don't realize what causes it. And they think of that as an external form or an internal form of isolation. Does that make sense?
We really got to be able to have time to process what we do. And I tell people, I go, a police officer lives a lifetime in the shift. You're going to see several traumas. You're going to get in fights. You're going to be scared for your life. People are going to lie to you. And that usually doesn't happen for an entire lifespan of people. And so when you get home is that some officers develop some very poor drinking habits that sometimes becomes alcoholism. But what happens is for PTSD is that one of the best medications for PTSD, unfortunately, is alcohol. But what happens, it turns you into an alcoholic. And so a lot of guys get home and they do the same thing, this numbing and detachment. They do what's called couch surfing. So they get home and they grab their favorite drink and they sit in their nice quiet room and they just watch anything on TV, which is usually Roadhouse. For some reason, Roadhouse is always on friggin' TV. I love that movie. Joe,
hey, man.
Am I going down the wrong hole? But once you realize that those are unhealthy habits and you can replace them with something else, I think that, like I said, is you got to see what the bad stuff is before you know what the good stuff is. You can meditate, you can do other things to replace that.
Well, let me stop you right there let me interject this one thought. In 2008, I had that problem with alcohol. I was headed down that road and Jack Daniels was my weapon of choice. But I drank to feel, if that makes sense. And I once read a book by an Army nurse, Linda Van Devanner, who was, I think, at the surgical hospital at Chu Lai. And she was talking about how they were oversaturated emotionally, mentally, physically, and all that. And her mind shut down and she drank to feel. And I didn't get it until I went off the war and came back, and I was like, you know what? And that's what I did. It's not that I didn't want to feel, it's that I wanted to feel because I was stuck. I was just treading water, and my brain hadn't, or my mind hadn't reached the point where it said, okay, Joe, you know what? It's okay to experience this. You have permission. And that was my crucible, I guess.
Agreed. Because I think about some of my life's episode of couch surfing at 2 a.m. in a quiet house, and to feel. And as a writer, I watching my favorite '80s movies or something, Roadhouse for the umpteenth time, or maybe Last Samurai, and I go, oh man, this would just sound great in my book, and I write all these notes, and then in the morning I'd wake up and I go, oh my god, that's gibberish. It's so it is. It's like it's this real great feeling of opening up, but you still got to process. You got to put stuff in, in perspective, and they're healthier ways to do a lot of this stuff. The one thing, Joe, if we could, I want to talk about also is staying busy, which is kind of a negative thing, and I saw this in a lot of people before they hit their breakdown. Is that like a lot of officers, they would come in and they would just work overtime, like never go home. They would take all that money and they would Winchester Mystery House, this place they just bought, and just like fix it up and build. And all of a sudden they're done with their house. And then shortly thereafter is the big break,
And then what?
Don't stay busy to avoid your feelings. And I kind of saw this coming down, at the end of the tunnel towards my career. I go, you know what? There's going to be a time where it's going to be very quiet, and those are the things that you have to kind of fall in love with, the opportunity to be peaceful, and so many people avoid that. It's one of the things that I think Path taught us and also validated. And I learned earlier on through, mindfulness and things, is that's really where the change comes, is in the peace and in the quiet when it comes to you. And so when people are staying busy, that's another chief indicator of detachment and distancing and isolation. You can be overly busy, which is not a good thing. It's time to reach out to somebody, to say, hey man, how you doing?
Well,
Joe?
if you think about that, you could summarize that in just one word, and that's fear.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown, fear of something different, fear of getting out of your comfort zone, which is running 100 miles an hour,
And I'm sorry, I can't summarize anything in one word. I'm just blah, 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 blah. So
killing me, man. You're
strategies
killing
for
me.
reducing risk of vicarious trauma. If you feel you may be suffering from vicarious trauma, try following these coping mechanisms. So the first one, this says, take care of yourself emotionally, engage in relaxing and self-soothing activities. We learned a lot about that in Warrior Path, the power of meditation, the power of perspective. Have you learned anything? Did they teach anything along the way?
Yeah, Team Rubicon does a good job of giving you the skill sets, and some of the softer skill sets is, dealing with somebody's having their worst days. They actually have a class on teaching empathy, how you approach these people. And I take these lessons everyday life, right? Yeah. I'm doing this for somebody who's having their bad day, but what about the person that's checking out my groceries,
Yes.
Grocery store or fixing a car or something? It just to me, it just go back to the golden rule once again.
Oh yeah. Greg, you brought up a really good point. It's like, go into the next time you're in a grocery store and just kind of like think about all of the 30 people you're going to walk past, 40 people, and just to go get some milk. And each one of those people are fighting their own battle.
Oh, and you don't know it.
You don't know.
If I only talk to one person in the grocery store, and it's the checker, I'm gauging how happy she was to say hi to me.
Yeah.
Or maybe she forgot to say hi. Maybe she's distracted. If I sense that they're down, I have a go-to joke.
Yeah.
And you got to be kind of a certain age, because it doesn't work for people under 25 years old. it's food. I'm buying food. I'll ask him, hey, do you have a layaway plan? You're not using a layaway plan to buy. Hey, I'll pay this up and I'll pick it up in 3 months, man. But and I guarantee 9 times out of 10, whether they think it's hokey or not, my family rolls their eyes. Oh, it's a dad joke.
Dad jokes.
But if I see a light go on, I'm perfectly happy making a fool of myself by saying that. But I enjoy like trying to get a smile out of somebody if I sense they're not having a good day.
You know, I mean, that's really just a sign of a mature soul, you know, is when we realize is that, you know, we count all the blessings in our lives so that we can bless other people, you know, so that we can be their inspiration, and we should strive to do that every day. You know, when we account for at night for all the wonderful miracles that happen to us today, which they always do, you may not know it, is that, you know, that's just a great thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do. Make a healthy work-life balance, have outside interests. You know, this is one of these things one of the first things I wrote on my blog post was right after Warrior Path or Warrior Week is have this work life balance, work spiritual balance, you know. And it's just really important because, you know what, if you're running a 6-minute mile still, but you know what, you haven't really opened your heart to your fellow man, or you haven't, you know, cracked a book that's going to make you think. I'm one of these guys that if I don't have an epiphany once a day, it's kind of a day lost. You know, I like to be stunned. You know, and I'm just all about that, accounting for, hey, what did I do physically today? Did I get my workout in? Did I do something spiritually? And did I create something? You know, because and the way that this article 3 Points of Contact opens up is that one of the things I did in the Marine Corps, I was an assault climber. I was one of the special operations climber. And one thing every climber knows is that you got to keep 2 hands or 2 feet or 1 hand, 2 feet before, or else you're going to fall. You know? And if you lose track of one of those balancing things in life, then you're going to fall. You're going to fall in life.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm a firm believer of the yin and yang, the balance of life, work life, whatever that balance is applied to. And I'll go back to you were talking earlier about staying busy as a negative, and I disagree a little bit in that if you're staying busy but you've got a nice balance, and busy might be working with the kids. Hey, I'm washing the car now, and you get the kids to come out there and you're talking about their day. You're still staying busy, but you're still interacting. I think when it's a negative is when you're staying busy and not 100% of the time not interacting with those that you love and those that should mean everything to you.
Yeah.
And so stay busy. And there may be a vet or a first responder out there that needs to hear stay busy isn't all bad as long as you've got that work-life balance and no regrets when you come to that rest point. That's when you definitely get together with the family if you haven't already been doing that. Laying on the pool deck or taking a drive somewhere, not mindless entertainment.
Yeah.
But I think that's staying busy. That's staying busy too, because family time is quality time.
How about this? Happy meeting, because
the
host is never wrong. Is that you know what? As long as you're not running from something.
Right.
I like that. Clarified. Joe, agree?
I agree.
I like it. Take regular breaks. Take time off when you need to.
Change the
socks. I like it. Seek social support with colleagues and members. I think that is wonderful.
Campfire.
Yeah, campfire. Use the buddy system. Man, that is so true. Is this, man? Nobody is in life alone, man.
Right.
Everybody needs a buddy, somebody to talk to. This next one's kind of one of the big ones, and I saw this in myself too. Use peer support and opportunities to debrief. And we've talked about this a few times. How Team Rubicon reaches out to you for welfare calls.
Right.
You guys have the campfire. And one thing that I learned about myself is we had the peer support, we had the debriefs and everything. And I had this real traumatic experience that I was the first responder to, and I was a sergeant. It was later in my career, and it was a dead baby, and the mother rolled over on the child and suffocated it at night. So I was right around the corner, a rainy day, trying to catch up on some report reviews from my officers. I needed to get out that night to make a dinner engagement, and this is an incident that automatically triggers peer support and a debrief. I had the therapist come in, and by the time, and this is in my career, it's probably the fourth time I've dealt with something similar to this. And so I was a first responder. I tried to resuscitate the baby, and the baby passed away. There were a lot of officers there. I was there in the room with a couple of other of my officers, along with EMS, and so the shift's over. The sergeant in charge of the peer support gives me a call and says, "Hey, Mark, you got to attend the peer support." And I go, "Hey, I don't need to go. I've been through this several times before, and I got to make a dinner engagement tonight." And he goes, "Hey, Mark, go to show that you support the program," which I support the program. I really did. And so I went. And so I have a whole crew there, probably 12 people. I was the first on scene. I give my account of what happened, went down the line. I noticed that there were officers that weren't even at the scene. They were on the premise, but they never made it to the scene. They were younger officers, and they were just so emotionally affected by it, crying and stuff. And so what it made me realize is that when you do this job, or you do these things so often, is that, and you become a leader, is that you can't forget when that was new to you.
Right.
And how these impact different people, and they are going to be the ones that you need to really reach out to. And so, so these are just great programs. Joe, do you agree?
Oh, 100%, man. But it's a learned response, because you're not taught how to handle situations in the beginning. It's only through your experiences that you learn how to handle them.
Yeah, this next one is kind of interesting about learning, is that take up training opportunities. And I thought about that, and I go, training opportunities. Well, yeah, training opportunities. So take a mindfulness course, take these courses that are going to enhance you emotionally, so you keep that balance in life. Warrior Path taught us a bunch of them. It's great programs that I hope people kind of look into. And if you need to take time off, or to get with a group, or have individual therapy, take it. I think that a lot of the stigma regarding therapy and those type of things. I mean, if you think there's a stigma attached to it still, you know what? 1990s just called and they want you back. Okay, it's you have to be very progressive and very willing. It's a huge buzzword now. Every other commercial you read about or hear about or whatever, it has to do with us being taking better care of ourselves emotionally.
Team Rubicon, again, back with the training that they provide, our site survey course online talks about the empathy that you should have, how to approach, how to listen, just basically listen. If these people need to tell you a 10-minute, 15-minute story, you need to listen to that story. They need to get it out there. We have online courses for suicide prevention called Assist, and so again, and along with the wellness calls, they're looking after us, but they're also teaching us how to approach people on their worst days. Is there something else we could be doing other than the physical stuff that we're doing emotionally? Can we put them in touch with Red Cross or a support group? Maybe it's just the local church. Hey, Father Johnson, you might want to go check on so and so at this address. I'm listening to the story. They're hurting.
Yeah, they're hurting. Yeah. Joe, you're active in the suicide prevention.
Yes, I am, through the National Crisis Line, and as a matter of fact, during every radio show, I give out the 1-800 number, the 741-741 text number, and also the 988 text number. And even though January is quote unquote mental health awareness and suicide prevention month, I use every month, 12 months a year, on my radio shows is just to get that message out.
Hey, we got a couple of questions and answers coming in. The 209 wants to know, how can someone join Team Rubicon?
That's super easy. Team Rubicon USA.org and follow the prompts. Do you want to become a gray shirt? How can I become deployable? Yeah, they make it super easy. You'll go through a background check. You'll take a grab your go bag class, a TR 101, just basically what you can expect to see in the process of becoming a gray shirt and getting out in the field finally and helping somebody on their worst days. If you can't do that, we have service projects where that's somebody needs some mitigation, fire mitigation work done in their yard. We're clearing out trees from their house in different zones. Maybe it's demolishing a house. We've got a service project coming up in March. A gray shirt has raised their hand and they've asked for help. Can you help me tear down this part of my house? We're the world's cheapest workforce.
Well, I tell you what, it's building a tremendous sense of community. If somebody wants to reach out to get a hold of you, the 415 wants to know. If you don't want to give out any of your personal information, you can get a hold of Craig through my website, markrclifford.com, and you can contact me. I think I got my phone number, my email, and everything in there.
Yeah, and I'm a decent person to contact too, because I'm recently took on the role of deputy membership for NorCal.
Okay.
So everywhere, basically, almost from the grapevine to the Oregon border, we're looking for new gray shirts. We're looking for the gray shirts that have signed up but haven't stepped into the arena yet. Want to know why, and a lot of that is anxiousness, the unknown. Like, what am I getting myself into? I've got 5-6 years experience. I can answer almost any question that those people might have.
That's awesome. 707. How did you and Craig meet each other?
High school.
Yeah. Sarah, class of 83. Sarah, if anybody doesn't know, it's the same high school that Barry Bonds went to, Tom Brady, and now they're very famous. They had 2 ads at the Super Bowl over the weekend. Greg Gutfeld, and then there's the rest of us.
Yeah.
So we're okay with that. Couple of other things. The 415 wanted to know if anybody found my treasure. Obviously, they went on to my website, and I buried a $1,000 gold ticket in San Francisco. You have to read the poem in Typhoon Coast and the clues, and it'll take you out to find it. Plenty more on my website. So all good. Joe, anything?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I wanted to talk real quick about Mr. James House and the song Still Got the Fire. Was that a culmination project or a joint writing project, or was James the veteran, or what's the dealio with that?
So it's Still Got the Fire. That's going to be our lead-in song. And so, in fact, I write the whole story behind the story on a blog post on my website, and it's called At the Crossroads, I think. And so when we're at Warrior Path, part of the program is that you and your fellow Path group, which I had 7, we called ourselves K7, you write a song. And it's a great experience. James House came in. He's a very well-known Nashville songwriter, and we came up with this great song. And I love it. Joe, you've written a couple. We actually wrote one together at Warrior Week, and it's a great exercise for veterans and first responders. It's just an emotionally uplifting experience. And so we're putting a portion of the song Still Got the Fire. The lead-in is a lead-in for our podcast. It's a great song. If you want to listen to the whole song, it's on my website under the blog post at the Crossroads. And it's a great story behind the story. Everybody lent to that song, from first responders to 9/11 survivor to Afghanistan, Iraq veterans, and we just pulled together and just wrote this beautiful song. And it's all about kind of, if you can imagine, is that you're feeding two wolves in life, the good wolf and the bad wolf, and it's up to you which one you want to feed. So, thanks for asking, Joe. Thanks for putting it on.
No problem, man. I will include that. I have about a minute 13-second sound bite that I'm going to edit in toward the end before we do the outro and the closing.
Cool. Thank you. So if you want to, Joe, if anybody wants to contact you,
they can do it several ways. You can contact me at the Boneyard 2021 at yahoo.com. That's the Boneyard 2020 at yahoo.com. Also, you could look up my two Facebook pages, Doc's Boneyard and DBY Radio. You can get in touch with me through all three of those pages.
And we do have a Facebook page, Heroes for Hope. Hopefully you can meet us there. And for me, if you need to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at markrclipper.com. You can check out more about me and my author's page, my book, Typhoon Coast, my book that's coming out, a couple of fiction things I've had in veteran magazines, and my blog posts about the rewarding work that they do at Camp Southern Ground through Warrior Path and Warrior Week. So great stuff. This week, if anybody's local and attending, I'll be at the San Francisco Writers Convention. For my California Writers Club, I had a great weekend last weekend. For the second week of March, I'm having author A.M. Larks there on March 11th, and she's going to be giving a workshop on point of view for anybody that's interested in writing. So it's all good in the writing hood. All good. Hey, unless there's something you want to say, I want to close up with a quote and also introduce my next guest for our final episode before we sign off. Any final comments?
If you want to help people on their worst days, I can't think of a better, more transparent organization than Team Rubicon. There are others out there, but especially for veterans and first responders, the skill sets that they learn in the military and on the force, apply those skills to helping somebody out. One of my favorite quotes from around the campfire is, I joined Team Rubicon to continue helping people and not get shot at. I laughed at it, kind of snickered a little bit, but then it really struck home. Like, this guy, he means every word of that. I'm just so happy to be a part of this organization. I'm super passionate about it. And again, go to Mark's website if you want to contact me personally, and I'll help you get set up and on your gray shirt journey.
Amen. Joe?
As a matter of fact, I have a live radio show coming up tonight. It's on voscast.com. You can go to DBY Radio and get the station link. I'll be on from 8 p.m. Eastern time until, maybe the cows come home. I don't know. Just depends on what I have programmed and how the music takes off tonight.
Amen. I want to close with this quote, and it's a quote that I kind of hold dear to my heart. I kind of consider myself the Pliny of Pinatubo, and Pliny, if you could remember, there was an elder and there was the younger Pliny, and they were the ones that gave us our first hand account of the eruption of Vesuvius in Pompeii in 79 AD. When we were talking about the golden rule, think about this when I read it about the two Plinies. The older Pliny, who was an admiral for the Roman Navy at the time, he was in a safe island across from Vesuvius, and he decided that, I need to go help in some capacity. And then the younger Pliny, who documents most of the observations, didn't feel good, so he stayed home and just watched and wrote about it. So I want to read this. You can hear the shrieks of women, the wailings of infants, and the shoutings of men. Some were calling their parents, others their children, their wives, trying to recognize them by their voices. People bewailed their own fate or that of their relatives. And there were some who prayed for death in their terror of dying. Many besought the aid of the gods, but still more imagined there were no gods left, and that the universe was plunged into eternal darkness forevermore. And that was from the Younger Pliny on the destruction of Pompeii. And when we think about ourselves as first responders and veterans, is that we're the people who go towards the needy, you know. And so I think about this a lot. I actually, when I was being buried in the ash of Pinatubo, I thought about, this is how I'm going to be found. I'm going to be found. My remains are going to be like the remains of a Roman soldier, who died in Pompeii. And fortunately, I survived that. So think about those. Those are powerful words in a powerful situation. Next episode, we're going to be hearing from my Warrior Path brother, Eric Rock Ramos, and hear his harrowing story of what it was like to be a New York City EMT at Ground Zero, witnessing the attack at 9/11 and feeling helpless. And he talks about this. He has a line in that song that Joe introduced about the rubble and what it was like to be somebody who wanted to help and just was helplessly watching people jumping to their death. And so we'll hear about Eric, about his background, about how Warrior Path helped him, and what he's doing today, getting beyond that. So amen to that. So thanks for being here. As we say it at
Amen,
every
brother.
end of every episode, Joe, what do we say?
Drive on.
Drive on.
Heroes for Hope is a joint Typhoon Coast Whiskey 901 production.